listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
I wanna see the light.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us be part of your day. My name is Jerry Mitchell. Sitting next to me is Myra, as usual.
Hi, everyone.
She wouldn't have it any other way.
Watching you.
Yeah, I know. Before we get into a whole lot today, I need to let you know that this, what you're hearing was actually recorded the night before, because there might be a timing issue with us tomorrow. We just wanted to make sure that this gets out there in case we don't get back in the time that we are expecting to get back. So want to make sure everybody stays on track. With that in mind, let me thank you again for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you, the folks who have been with us all this time and the very new folks who are joining us all the time. Don't forget, if you go to givegod90.com, there's all kinds of good stuff there you can look at and hear. Don't forget the videos that are on there. There's all kinds of good videos on there. My series on a couple of chapters of Matthew, there's, I think, about altogether 10 hours, something like that. Somewhere close. But, you know, it gives you a whole different perspective on that. If you like what you're hearing, you know, we appreciate the likes and the shares. If you really like what you're hearing, you know, as you're on Give God 90, look up the books and see what they're all about, and visit your local bookstore and let them order something for you. You won't be disappointed. So, we are in the middle of Hanukkah. We left off on Monday morning with the first miracle that's recorded, and that is the defeat of 6,000 Greek soldiers by 3,000 faithful Israeli men. We're going to look at something that I think should be considered a miracle, and I hope you do too. It's found in 1 Maccabees 4, 26 through 40. It's a little long, but I know Myra can get through it if she can read all the Greek names.
Those of the foreigners who escaped went and reported to Lysias all that had happened. When he heard it, he was perplexed and discouraged, for things had not happened to Israel as he had intended, nor had they turned out as the king had commanded him. But the next year he mustered 60,000 picked infantrymen and 5,000 cavalry to subdue them. They came to Idumea and encamped at Beth-zur, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. When he saw that the army was strong, he prayed, saying, Blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who dost crush the attack of the mighty warrior by the hand of thy servant David, and didst give the camp of the Philistines into the hand of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and of the man who carried his armor. So do thou hem in this army by the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be ashamed of their troops and their cavalry. Fill them with cowardice, melt the boldness of their strength, let them tremble in their destruction. Strike them down with the sword of those who love thee, and let all who know thy name praise thee with hymns. Then both sides attacked, and there fell of the army of Lysias 5,000 men. They fell in action. And when Lysias saw the rout of his troops and observed the boldness which inspired those of Judas, and how ready they were either to live or to die nobly, he departed to Antioch and enlisted mercenaries to invade Judah again with an even larger army. Then said Judas and his brothers, Behold, our enemies are crushed. Let us go up to cleanse the sanctuary and dedicate it. So all the army assembled, and they went up to Mount Zion. And they saw the sanctuary desolate, the altar profaned, the gates burned. In the courts they saw bushes sprung up as in a thicket, or as on one of the mountains. They saw also the chambers of the priests in ruins. Then they rent their clothes, and they mourned with great lamentation, and sprinkled themselves with ashes. They fell face down on the ground, and sounded the signal on the trumpets, and cried out to heaven.
Okay. Now, it's easy to think that the defeat of 65,000 trained soldiers by 10,000 men is a miracle, right? But look at what else happened here. Judas asked for the enemy to be filled with cowardice, and they were. When 5,000 of the enemy were killed, the rest were absolutely terrified, and they fled. Everything that Judas prayed for happened. The Israelites were so dedicated that after the defeat, when they found the temple in such shambles, they tore their clothes, sprinkled themselves with ashes. Then all of them fell down in prayer. At the sound of the shofar, each one prayed. Now, it's not recorded what that prayer was, but, in my mind, and here's a speculation warning, okay? In my mind, the speculation that I just know that they prayed began with Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad. Well, let's just put it this way. Hear, Israel. Yehovah is our God. Yehovah is one. And you will love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your very. Because that's the way it's written. Vebechol. Vehicle Moedeka. All of your very. What's your very? It's everything you have to offer. Everything you have to offer. That's what they prayed, in my mind. And I bet, I'm kind of a betting person, but I would imagine that I'm pretty close to being accurate there. And now we get to the good part. We've looked at a couple of miracles. We've looked at some things that I think should be a miracle. Let's get to the good part and go to 1 Maccabees 4, 12 through 50. No, that can't be right. 41 through 50. I had a misprint in my notes here.
Then Judas detailed men to fight against those in the citadel until he had cleansed the sanctuary. He chose blameless priests devoted to the law, and they cleansed the sanctuary and removed the defiled stones to an unclean place. They deliberated what to do about the altar of burnt offering, which had been profaned. They thought it best to tear it down, lest it bring reproach upon them, for the Gentiles had defiled it. So they tore down the altar, and the stones in the convenient place on the temple hill until there should come a prophet to tell what to do with them. Then they took unhewn stones, as the law directs, and built a new altar like the former one. They also rebuilt the sanctuary and the interior of the temple and consecrated the courts. They made new holy vessels and brought the lampstands, the altar of incense, and the table into the temple. Then they burned incense on the altar and lighted the lamps on the lampstand, and these gave light in the temple.
Okay. Now, the light that they lit in the temple was not the 8-branch Hanukkah that we see today. It was a 7-branch menorah. That is one thing that they made sure remained. They did all of this according to the instructions, not just from the Torah, from the first 5 books of the Bible, but from the righteous priests who knew how to perform their duties as it was taught to them. And we know that that comes down through David. You know, those things were given to, the temple services were given to David by the Almighty himself. And look at what they did. Judas sends a detail of men, and he says, look, there's still going to be some of the king's folks out there that are going to want to fight. You go take care of them. And then he began with the others to make sure that they were cleaning things up. He chose righteous priests who were devoted to the law, not to anything strange, right? They were devoted to the law and to the covenant. They cleansed the sanctuary. They took the defiled stones to an unclean place. And when they got to the altar, they stopped and said, what do we do? Because they weren't sure. This had never been done before. Nothing like this had really happened. They had no direction. And they said, well, just to be safe, we're going to take these out. We're going to put them in a dedicated place. And, if there's ever a prophet that comes around to tell us what to do, well, we can do something different. But until then, we're going to put them over here. We're going to make a new one exactly the way we're going to follow the instructions as close as we got. And that's what they did. When they weren't sure, they erred on the side of caution, right? There wasn't any of this, well, it's just God. It'll be okay. That's not the way they were thinking. What they were thinking was, we need to do not the least we can do, but the most we can do. They made new holy vessels. They brought in the lampstand, the temple menorah, the altar of incense, and the table of showbread. They put bread on the table, or they lit the lamps, put bread on the table, and they were good to go. And we're going to skip now to 2 Maccabees 10, and you're going to read verses 1 through 9, because here's where we get the big victory.
Now Maccabees and his followers, the Lord leading them on, recovered the temple and the city, and they tore down the altars which had been built in the public square by the foreigners, and also destroyed the sacred precincts. They purified the sanctuary and made another altar of sacrifice. Then, striking fire out of flint, they offered sacrifices. After a lapse of 2 years, they burned incense and lighted lamps and set out the bread of the presence. And when they had done this, they fell prostrate and besought the Lord that they might never again fall into such misfortune, but that if they should ever sin, they might be disciplined by him with forbearance and not be handed over to blasphemous and barbarous nations. It happened that on the same day on which the sanctuary had been profaned by the foreigners, the purification of the sanctuary took place, that is, on the 25th day of the same month, which is Kislev, and they celebrated it for 8 days with rejoicing, in the manner of Feast of Booths, remembering how not long before, during the Feast of Booths, they had been wandering in the mountains and caves like wild animals. Therefore, bearing ivy-wreathed wands and beautiful branches and also fronds of palm, they offered hymns of thanksgiving to him who had given success to the purifying of his holy place. They decreed by public ordinance and vote that the whole nation of the Jews would observe these days every year. Such then was the end of Antiochus, who was called Epiphanes.
Okay. Did you catch that? They chose to celebrate according to the Feast of Tabernacles, according to Sukkot. Now, I didn't read anything in here about finding a can of oil that lasted for 8 days. No, nothing there about that. In fact, you can search the Maccabees, the book of 1st and 2nd Maccabees, and you're not going to find it. You're not going to find it until you get into some post-Second Temple writing. That's after 70 AD. That's where you find the legend of the oil. And unfortunately, that has taken more precedence over Hanukkah than the real miracles. The real miracles where people were, I guess, looking back on it, we could say that it was a miracle that so many people were willing to live the way their Creator designed them to live. It really was a miracle that they were willing to follow His instructions. That many people were willing to follow His instructions, right? We could say that. We today it looks like a miracle when we think about people actually doing what the Almighty asked them to do. Now, if you look in some other history books, Josephus is well respected and well quoted from the secular group. And if we look at Antiquities of the Jews, book 12, beginning in chapter 6, and I'm going to read this to spare somebody some strange words. Now it fell out that these things were done on the very same day on which their divine worship had fallen off. It means they got the temple back on the same day, 2 years later, exactly the same day when they all that started. And it was reduced to a profane and common use after 3 years' time. For so it was that the temple was made desolate by Antiochus, and so continued for 3 years. For this desolation happened in the temple in the 145th year, on the 25th day of the month Apelius. Now that sounds a little different, doesn't it? But remember, this is somebody else who is telling the story. And he's not getting it from the Maccabees. He's getting it from other sources. So, as close as these sources are relevant, we can pretty much say, yeah, it's exactly the same. Because on the 25th day of the month of Apelles, on the 153rd Olympiad, you notice how the Greeks tell time here? They tell time by what they know is happened. But it was dedicated anew on the same day, the 25th month of Alepius, on the 148th year, and the 154th Olympiad. And this desolation came to pass according to the prophecy of Daniel, which was given 408 years before. For he declared that the Macedonians would dissolve that worship. Have you ever considered? Well, I'm going to save that for another time. When a lot of people who look at one of the prophecies as already having happened, and it just hasn't happened yet. and the desolation of the temple did occur, but it's not, when Yeshua said, when you see the desolation of abomination, right? He's saying this is a future event. And you have seminary professors who say, no, it's already happened. Well, they need to check their timeline just a little bit. Now, Judas celebrated the festival of the restoration of the sacrifices of the temple for 8 days, and omitted no sort of pleasure thereon, but he feasted them upon very rich and splendid sacrifices, and he honored God and delighted them by hymns and psalms. Nay, they were so very glad at the revival of their customs, when after a long time of intermission they unexpectedly had regained the freedom of their worship, that they made it a law for their posterity that they should keep a festival on account of the restoration of their temple worship for 8 days. And from that time to this we celebrate this festival and call it Lights. Pretty simple, right? I suppose the reason was because this liberty, beyond our hopes, appeared to us, and that thence was the name given to the festival. Little sub note here. Judas also rebuilt the walls round about the city, and he reared towers of great height against the incursions of the enemies, and set guards therein. He also fortified the city of Bethsura, that it might serve as a citadel against any distress that might come from our enemies. Well, we know that didn't last long, right? It's just the way that happened. Now, remember, Josephus, when he's writing a history of the Jews and the Hebrew people, but he's writing for the Greeks and Rome, what would eventually be the Roman occupations. You know, as he's doing this, he's not writing to talk about how great and wonderful the Hebrew people are. He's writing a history that is given to how they should look at these people, right? You know, it's not, hey, aren't we great and wonderful? What he's writing about is he's putting it in their perspective of how the Romans should view the Hebrew people. And you know, when you're given a job to do, you know, they're paying your bills, so you kind of want to lean towards their way of doing things, right? You want to give it from their viewpoint. Now, having said all that, let me re-emphasize that the miracle of the oil never happened. And it's become more popular than any other miracle that surrounds Hanukkah. Like so many other celebrations and traditions and legends. You know, the legends, the traditions overshadow the truth. That's kind of sad. But here at Hanukkah, the one thing that cannot be overshadowed is the definition of Hanukkah: dedication. Just like the temple was able to be rededicated, you know, it's possible to take something that is very abnormal and you can dedicate that in all of its problems and all of its abnormalities and all of its not looking right, and you can work on it and you can dedicate it for the service of the Almighty. And just like the temple was able to be cleaned up, cleansed, fixed up, put back together, did it look like it used to? Probably not. Right? Let's face it, you know, the people who were working on it they were soldiers for a couple of years, right? They were ruffians. Did it have all the finesse and fit and finish and fineness that it had prior to the Greek invasion? No. But they did the best they could. At Hanukkah, well, just like every other day, but especially at Hanukkah, we have the opportunity to rededicate our lives, because it's when we think about dedicating things. It's when we think about, can we, you know, are we good enough? If I work on me just a little bit, is that good enough? Well, yeah, kind of. Because hopefully you're not working on me just a little bit. You're working on you the best that you can do, right? you might not be a craftsman, but if you can polish something up, right? You can help. I got to tell the story. When Myra and I got married, one of the things that we used to joke about was, of course, you grew up in a Baptist house, right?
Yes.
So, makeup was a thing that was questioned among some people, right? Some religions still don't let women wear makeup, right? That's their denominational thing, right?
Right.
Well, the joke was, if the barn needs painting, you paint it. Okay? So, think about it. If you can slap a coat of paint on something and make it look a little better, make it last a little longer, preserve it a little bit, right? Then that's what you're able to do. And when you do that with yourself, so that you're getting cleaned up, you're going through the motions, you're doing the things you can do. There's a lot of people out there that think that they'll never ever be good enough because they don't have the words, they don't have the motions, they don't know all the stuff they think they ought to know. But that doesn't matter, and we have the perfect example of that in the victory and the miracles of Hanukkah. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. The altar that they took out, we never really understand. We never learn. I'm pretty sure that nothing has been written what was done with those stones. They put those stones out and said, if a prophet comes by and tells us what to do with these, we'll do it. Was it the perfect solution? No, but it was a solution. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the fit and the finish. You're still a work in progress. You will always be a work in progress. I know that because, Meyer keeps telling me I'm a work in progress, right? So you will never, ever, ever be good enough until you're made perfect. But that comes later. But you can rededicate yourself to the service of the Almighty. You can rededicate yourself to the service of your Creator by learning how to live the way He designed you to live. What are you waiting for? If you're waiting for Hanukkah and a good representation, well, here's your chance. Even if you choose not to celebrate Hanukkah, right? You don't have to light the lights. It's okay. But you can still rededicate your life to the service of the Almighty. You can learn how to improve your life and the lives of the people around you, doing nothing more than learning how to live the way you're designed to live. You can be a light in the darkness. See how I kind of snuck that one in there? Okay.
You did.
Okay, good. So you can be a light in the darkness. You can. You don't have to light the lights, but you can light your own, right? It worked better in my mind, I think, than what I just said. But anyway, that example that you can be for other people to follow, to show them that it's okay to live the way they're designed to live. You can be the example that we're supposed to be as representatives of the Almighty, as the ones who are there in His, on earth in His place at the moment. Now, if that doesn't kind of make you nervous, I don't know what would. To represent your Creator in His creation. That's what your job is here. And the best way to do that is to dedicate your life to His service and then learn to live the way He designed you to live. did you have anything you wanted to add to all of that?
I hope everyone has a blessed Hanukkah, and we will talk to you again on Monday.
We will be here on Monday, and I don't know of anything that's getting in the way on Monday. So, until Monday, everyone, many, many blessings.